What are some Nsfw history facts that don't get taught in schools? Story 1. Every year, the pharaoh's solemn duty was go to the Nile's banks, disrobe, and masturbate. But of course, many other men would follow him, and when the pharaoh was done, they too would bash one out on the banks. Further, it was believed that the pharaoh had to be sure that a significant amount of his gentleman's relish as possible landed in the river rather than on land to guarantee an excellent future harvest. Story 2. Peter the Great scoured the Russian Empire in search of dwarfs and giants to breed a race of each. While he couldn't find enough giants, he found many dwarfs. He would bake a giant pie and have a dwarf get naked and wait inside to jump out and scare guests, in addition to using them as regular stewards and servants and such. Story 3. Scientist Robert Hooke, known for his early work in mechanics, timekeeping, astronomy, and what would eventually become physics, kept a detailed diary that recorded his orgasms using a particular astrological symbol. He never married, but carried on several long-term sexual relationships with a housekeeper and his niece and ward, Grace. Story 4. When the French citizens imprisoned Marie Antoinette, they took her kids. Then they had her oldest son raped by prostitutes so that he would contract their STDs. They then tried to use this as grounds to test her for abusing her children. The accusations went nowhere, so the poor kid was given a ton of venereal diseases for nothing. Story 5. Thomas Granger was the first juvenile to be executed in what would become the USA. He was convicted of buggery with a mare, a cow, 2 goats, several sheep, 2 calves, and a turkey, and hung in September 1642. Story 6. The U.S. government did some pretty messed up experiments on their soldiers using chemical weapons and drugs like LSD at a facility called Edgewood. There's a documentary called Bad Trip to Edgewood, which includes a recording of a soldier doing an obstacle course on PCP. Story 7. The U.S. had a eugenics program in the 70s that sterilized thousands of women, mostly black and poor. They would often do this under the guise of an emergency appendectomy post-birth. A woman gave birth to a rape baby and didn't know why she could never have children after. She was able to receive damages. Look up Buck versus Bell. Story 8. The corpse of Discovery only ate meat and had incredible constipation. Then, one day, they all ate pills they named Thunderclappers, which immediately made them shit out everything. But the drugs had a bit of metal in them. So if you go out on the same trail as the corpse of Discovery with a metal detector, you can find the exact place Lewis, Clark, and the rest of the corps took the biggest shits of their lives. Story 9. In occupied Japan, just after the treaty, the Japanese government rounded up Japanese women to serve U.S. troops sexually. This was to prevent the presumed widespread rape of Japanese women. It was called the Recreation and Amusement Association and was shut down eventually, after a few months, by GHQ. Story 10. Savannah, Georgia, was only saved from Sherman's march to the sea because his former mistress lived in the city. So she came to him, begging him for him to spare the city. But instead, she stayed the night. I'd say that was the most effective use of the power of the pussy in American history. Story 11. When the first fleet brought the first convicts to start the colony that became Sydney, Australia, the men and women convicts were segregated on different ships. When they were put ashore after months at sea, it started a party that took the guards 2 days to stop. Story 12. Those prudish Victorians were goddamn kinky. The men specifically, as most surviving erotica was produced for men. Being spanked, or the English vice, was viral, as was pedophilia. Don't believe me? Look up The Maiden Tribute of Modern Babylon. Women, like men, could be institutionalized for masturbation. It seems they had to use their imaginations, though, as pornography was very much aimed at men. What they had that men didn't was the ability to be more or less openly homosexual. Story 13. A college history professor had told us that Martin Luther came up with the idea of salvation through faith alone when, while spending an entire day in prayer, he got a boner in church. He thought, well, fuck me, if I can sin while deep in meditative prayer, maybe no one can avoid sin, and the only thing saving us is our belief. However, I haven't been able to verify this on my own, so either I haven't found it yet or he was just bullshitting us. Otherwise, he was an outstanding professor, so I believe him. Story 14. Some of my friends from college didn't learn this, even though I did, but it still counts to me. Louis XVI was a big fan of locksmithing as a hobby. Louis also had sexual difficulties during his marriage to Marie Antoinette. My teacher taught us that the locksmith couldn't have the keyhole, and it was the absolute best thing I've ever heard from an educator's mouth in my life. Story 15. Lyndon B. Johnson had a bit of an obsession with his penis, which he named Jumbo. He would constantly brag about it and show it off to people. Once during an interview, he was asked a question involving Vietnam. At a loss of what to say, he just whipped it out. Story 16. Lavrentiy Beria was one of Stalin's right-hand men and head of the NKVD, Soviet secret police, during the Second World War. He led the massive Soviet espionage operation against the U.S. that helped him build an atomic bomb, supervised the installation of communist regimes in Eastern Europe, and is rumored to have even offed the feared Stalin. He was also apparently a serial sexual predator. He regularly had women detained in his Moscow villa, where he would wine, dine, and subsequently rape them. Members of the Politburo, including Stalin, knew of this and warned their wives and daughters away from him. He had his bodyguard keep a list of his victims. It's probable he even had some of these women killed. Human remains were found in the grounds of his former home in the mid-90s. Stalin might have been wrong, but he seems saintly compared to his fellow Georgian. Story 17. The Swedish king Gustav III was told to be asexual, and when he was going to perform his royal duty towards his wife, the stable boy man had to come up to the bedroom and hide in the closet. From time to time, he came out and had to demonstrate to the queen how to penetrate the king. Story 18. Julius Caesar was known for romancing the lovers of men. He didn't like to bring them down, hurt their reputation. He even allegedly went as far as sleeping with the king of a city that used to be called Carthage. As a result, he was referred to as the Queen of Carthage. Caesar just fucked people until he got his way. Story 19. Jim Jones and his cult. That incident is one of the most disturbing crimes ever committed. I was distraught that it was never mentioned in school, as I found out about it on the top 10 list on YouTube 2 years ago after graduating high school. There's so much to be learned from Jones's massacre. Story 20. During the war in the Pacific, World War II, after the Japanese soldiers captured a town for their garrisons in the Philippines, they would cut the breasts of women they raped as trophies using their bayonets. Story 21. President John F. Kennedy had a collection of rubber dicks. He and his 19-year-old mistress would play with them before sex. He had a collection of little yellow rubber ducks, and they were in the bathtub, and rubber ducks sort of became part of the game, she said in the interview. We had races with rubber ducks in the bathtub. Story 22. Gandhi used to have young girls sleep naked with him and have them give him nude massages. Weirder, he had them perform enemas on top of him. He thought of poop because he would also greet his live-in maids in the morning with questions about their recent bowel movements. Then Gandhi's wife was stricken with pneumonia. British doctors told him that a simple shot of penicillin would save her life, but he said that the medicine was alien, refused, and allowed her to die. Shortly after, however, he contracted malaria and accepted alien medicine with open arms. He later allowed British doctors to remove his appendix when he had appendicitis, going against his Hindu beliefs for himself, but not his wife. Story 23. During World War II, the U.S. firebombed the ever-living shit out of Japan. These raids killed more people than both nuclear bombs combined. The heat on the ground was so intense that people's heads exploded. Read the book, Flyboys.